Week 12 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few tight ends I looked at off the wire this week. The first tight end, Dalton Schultz of the Houston Texans. Very surprising. Schultz still available with just under 50% of fantasy leagues out there and 51% of fantasy leagues. Easily the number 2 option in this passing game for the Houston Texan team. And now 4 out of 5 games, double-digit fantasy points. It's been for Schultz. Week 9 versus Denver, 6 catches, 77 yards on 8 targets. Week 10 versus Jaguars, 7 catches, 53 yards, a touchdown, 11 targets. In Week 11 at Tennessee, 6 catches, 51 yards, 9 targets. So the targets have been there big time over the last few weeks. 8 or more targets, 3 games in a row for Dalton Schultz. He's a good in the middle of the field tight end, can make plays, has a knack for the end zone at times. And this week in a matchup versus the Buffalo Bills, where they're going to put a lot of points on the board, is Buffalo, and they're going to have to try to keep up. Is a Houston Texan team, and I imagine they throw the football a whole lot. Dalton Schultz, definitely a good tight end for fantasy owners to go out there and get. And like I said, just made this list available in 51% of fantasy league. Next tight end, Colston Loveland of the Chicago Bears. So Colston Loveland still out there in 52% of fantasy leagues. I know Cole Kmet outplayed him in the Week 11 game in Minnesota, but Loveland, like I said, he was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft this season. He could go out there and make plays. We saw it in Week 9. We had his breakout game, 6 catches, 118 yards, 2 touchdowns. Week 10 versus the Giants, decent game, 4 catches, 55 yards. In Week 11 at Minnesota, 3 catches, 40 yards. So Week 12, a good matchup on paper versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. I give up the 5th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. And Colston Loveland, like I said, he was a big prospect in college. They even took him over Tyler Warren in this NFL draft. And as the weeks go on, we see rookies get more into the offense and start making more plays. So like I said, Loveland, I know Cole Kmet had a better game than him in Week 11, but I think Loveland could bounce back this week and have a good ball game and out there in 52% of fantasy leagues. Next tight end, Juwan Johnson of the New Orleans Saints. After the bye week, Johnson's still out there in 55% of fantasy leagues, and he's been one of the better tight ends in fantasy football, believe it or not, all season long is Juwan Johnson, and the number 2 option in this offense behind Chris Olave in the passing game. Week 7 at the Bears, 5 catches, 79 yards. Week 8 versus the Bucks, 5 catches, 53 yards. Week 9 at the Rams, 3 catches, 31 yards. And Week 10 at the Panthers, 4 catches, 92 yards, a touchdown. So like I said, Juwan Johnson, he's been solid. 4 games in a row, double-digit fantasy points. He's been a matchup problem for linebackers, safeties, whoever they've been putting on him. And like I said, this team's going to be trailing a majority of the season. It's this New Orleans Saints team and show rookie quarterback where he relies on the tight end position as a security blanket and their best friend. So with all those factors, Juwan Johnson definitely a solid add. This week, the next tight end, A.J. Barner of the Seattle Seahawks. Barner showed some good flashes, but was a touchdown-dependent tight end early in the season. And now, the last 2 out of 3 weeks, he still had double-digit fantasy points. Week 9 at the Commanders, a 1-yard goal line touchdown rush, 3 catches, 24 yards. Week 10, did nothing, 2 carries, 3 yards. In Week 11, nice bounce back for him, 10 catches, which is a huge number at the tight end position. 70 receiving yards on 11 targets. So A.J. Barner, he's been a good option all season long for the Seattle Seahawks team. I know fantasy's been up and down, and a guy who's out there in 91% of fantasy leagues. But like I said, he's pretty much the second option most weeks than not in this passing game for the Seattle Seahawks team. And a tight end for fantasy owners to add this week. And the final tight end, Darnell Washington of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Darnell Washington, last season didn't do much. This season, it's been up and down for him. But the last couple weeks, he's starting to get into his playbook more. I know obviously they got Pat Freiermuth, you got Jonnu Smith, but Washington, a big tight end, especially in the red zone, that could go out there and make plays, 6'7", 6'8", big target obviously. And like I said, he looked good in the ball game versus Cincinnati Bengals. In the last 2 out of 3 weeks, he's had 8 or more fantasy points in PPR leagues. Week 9 versus the Colts, 4 catches, 43 yards. Week 10 at the Chargers, a catch, 15 yards. In Week 11 versus the Bengals, 4 catches, 67 yards on 5 targets, which was the best game of the season for Darnell Washington. So week after week, he's starting to get more touches in this offense as Washington. Like I said, a guy could go out there, make plays, and a big target, and someone to add this week, available in 99% of fantasy leagues. That's a few tight ends I looked at off the wire for Week 12 of the fantasy football season.